Hi, welcome to the Sweet Slumber Podcast, the good, the bad, and the sleep deprived. I am your host, Meredith Bruff. I'm a wife, a mother of 5, a childcare expert, and a sleep coach. I'm here to teach you the most effective sleep advice for infants and young children. With my guidance, sleep will become something that you look forward to again, and you will feel rested. I believe that motherhood is the most important and demanding role that we have, but the challenges and accomplishments that go along with it go unnoticed frequently. We are going to talk openly about these things so that we can draw strength and compassion from each other. I will share my perspective as a seasoned mother and help you experience more fulfillment. Hello, everyone. Today I am going to be meeting with Dr. Laura Gainche to discuss what's wrong with sleep training. Hi, Laura. Thank you for being a guest on the show.
Hi, Meredith. Thanks so much for having me.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Laura Gainche. She's going to say her name for you because she's got a better way of pronouncing it than me. But she has a PhD. She's a sleep scientist and a holistic sleep coach. She helps mothers turn sleeplessness into blissful nights through the power of science and connection. She believes sleep is not one size fits all and wants moms to thrive in the parenting that suits them and their unique families. She's living in Tokyo right now, but she's originally from France, and she's a mother of a 7-year-old daughter and 2 cats. She lived in Boston for 6 months working in Harvard doing research. And I think you should tell us a little about that, because that sounds like your passion.
Yes. So I think I was a researcher from like my first year of university. Oh yeah, by the way, how to say my name? So how to say my name? Laura Gainche in French. And I'm a scientist and I have a PhD in human sleep physiology. But before that, my first year of university, I was doing biology and I loved research immediately. Like lots of people get into it because they don't know what they want to do later, maybe. For me, it was immediate. I loved research. And I did multiple internship in Italy was my first one. And then I went to Boston. But immediately I was in this genetics program, but everything I would do would be related to the brain. Neuroscience all the way. And so when I was in Boston, I studied brain tumors and how to diagnose brain tumors with a blood sample, which was like fantastic. And I was working with amazing people. And after that, I went to Japan for the first time. And after that, I did my PhD in Australia and then moved to Switzerland and then back to Japan. And in the meantime, I had a baby, found out that lots of families did not have the information that they should. And got really pushed into helping families with sleep. And I love it.
So are you working in a facility now too?
No, unfortunately, honestly, like research is pretty much like being a mom, like it's full-time plus extra. It's really not possible for me to do both. But I really hope that this business will help me go full circle. And then I really want to open, like that's my, the big dream that you never know if it'll happen, but you still work towards. I want to open a research institute just for women and families and do all the studies that we don't have. Just another anecdote, the first time where this hit me was during my pregnancy, when I had the morning sickness, and I was like, okay, I'll do some research, go check all my articles and stuff. And I'm like, wait, we still don't know why women have morning sicknesses. Like this is like literally, I haven't done this research, but this is easy research. Like this, there's probably maybe 1 to 5 elements that probably create this biological reaction that women have, and we still can't explain it. It just means that most of the population doesn't care for women. And that's where I was like, I want to make a difference. And so, yeah, my website is Science for All Women because I have a much bigger goal in mind.
That's amazing. I love that. And you're not the first medical professional to tell me that there's so much lacking when it comes to what we know for women. Like, I've interviewed so many people in other fields who are like, yeah, when I had a baby, I couldn't believe that I couldn't go to the sources that I relied on for information about my body and what I was going through. Like, it's crazy. So I love your idea. I know you're going to do it. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
So I discovered Laura through Instagram. I can't even remember like if my one friend sent me a post or if I just found you, but I love your reels. Sometimes they're funny. They're always inspiring. They're always insightful and encouraging. So I look forward to seeing your posts and learning from you all the time. And that's why I can't wait to hear from you today. So Laura, can you kind of start to unfold your thoughts? Oh, I forgot, I wanted to explain. So this is a new series for me. I only have a couple of interviews, but I am making this new podcast series called What's Wrong with Sleep Training to educate parents about the popular but outdated practice of using cry and Ferber. And I'm even not a fan of the gentle methods where there's supported crying, and we'll talk about that later. But these techniques are not a good fit for many babies, and they can have lasting consequences on our children. And I just really want to help parents before they choose an approach to have the background and the knowledge, the information, and make the best decision for their family. So that's why we're doing this. So what are some of the concerns that pop in your head when I even bring the subject up?
Well, I would say the first thing is that when I started this, I was really so hopeful about the whole prevention aspect. So like helping parents to sleep better, but they know already, before the baby's out, just to find out that this is in the current society, it's completely impossible because you only start seeking solutions, which also pushes mom towards sleep training when you're completely burnt out.
Yes, they do.
And I think that really comes from, you're pregnant and you're told that your goal when you're pregnant is to set up a beautiful nursery. When pregnancy is about taking care of yourself, taking care of your baby, and getting ready for the delivery and the postpartum and this big marathon in front of you. And all this knowledge for me, and I think that's my latest post, but all the services that are necessary for new moms, this is what matters, not like the color of the walls in baby rooms. They really can't care less. So that would be the first thing, because moms get burnt out. Society is so strong with this sleep training idea that they don't know where to turn, and they're like, oh, that's what I have to do.
Especially because it's so common for doctors. That's their go-to answer, at least in America.
Yeah, so in Japan, it's different because the bed sharing is very, very common. However, there's other issues with that because parents are very disconnected from their kids, I would say. And I don't want to stereotype, and especially as a foreigner, but in my observation, a lot of parents don't really know their kids and what they need. So they kind of go in automatic mode without wondering. And so even with the bed sharing, there's a lot of things that arise from there.
Yeah, I've noticed in some countries they really aren't educated about safe sleep as well.
Yeah.
Well, one of the notes that you made in preparations was about the problem with sleep training being a one-size-fits-all solution. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's, for me, an issue in general. And I'm always kind of confused where people are like, oh yeah, now we know that for, like, let's say dieting, like some people are vegan and some people are not, and they can achieve similar results for their particular body. So there's a lot of industries where you start to have this diversity in idea, but in the sleep industry, it's still like, and I would even dare to say in the parenting industry, we still have this idea of the exact steps that you're supposed to do with kids to get good kids and good sleep. And I'm really tired of that, because you would never expect adults to need exactly the same things. And even if they don't notice, it's like we don't all sleep the same way. We don't eat the same way. The culture is so different, the environment. That's the first thing. In Japan, like the size of housings is like a third at least of American houses. Like you can't do the same things with your children in general, whether asleep or not. And so this is a big issue for me, like understanding that health and well-being in general is unique to the person, and it's not a one-size methodology that's going to work for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And one part of that is also understanding how different we are as individuals and our needs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that is a subject that I really love to talk about, because parents don't understand those differences. They don't understand about temperament.
Yes.
They don't understand their kids' needs in general. So
yes,
that would be wonderful to learn from you about too. What are your thoughts on individual needs or safety, physiological needs, that sort of thing?
Yeah. It's funny because, and you probably know about this, but for example, iron has a lot of effect on sleep. If you're iron deprived as an adult and a kid, you can have a bit of different type of reaction, but still, and we have these thresholds, right, to tell you if it's good or not. And for me, this is really, I can't even believe this still exists and that doctors believe in this threshold, because like when you will feel optimally good for iron or any kind of nutrient, it will be different according to what your body size, your height. Like how can a threshold say you're good now? And I was actually talking about a mom this morning, and she was like, oh yeah, I think I was just under the threshold. And I'm like, yeah, that means that's the bare minimum. And finding doctors who want you to feel optimally good and not just minimally good, and sorry if my English is not correct,
Oh, it's great.
is really hard. Like that people, and I understand that people look for naturopath or alternative medicine, because these people, maybe like you and I, actually were considered more alternative health practitioners. We actually listen to their whole needs and this holistic picture of the whole thing. So yeah, that's what I was thinking right now.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, because it's important for people in our field to be aware of the whole picture.
Yes.
We must dive in and understand as much as we can about everything, every aspect. There's so much more to sleep than just schedule,
yes.
or just that self-soothing popular belief.
Yes.
So much more. And so
yeah.
That's one of those issues too, isn't it? That they just don't look deep enough, and they don't look at all of those medical needs, or it's not like most of us aren't doctors in this field, but we can at least have some of those, be watching for red flags, sending them to get things checked out, send them to you or others with a bigger picture that can help with some of the other issues that could be there.
And that's another thing that I feel like we're losing touch of, is we're really scared of experimenting. And I've noticed when I look back with my daughter, I ended up experimenting, and it makes sense because I'm a researcher. So, I kind of looked at my daughter like an experiment in a good way. But I noticed that even if I can see that I had some anxiety around sleep, because the society is so pressuring to make you believe, things are supposed to happen at 4 months and 0 day, this kind of stuff. But I really wish parents would feel more comfortable trusting in themselves, and that I completely understand is so hard because of this society pressure. But just like watch their kids, just look at their kids, and don't be scared. And I'm definitely not for cry it out, but giving an opportunity to a child to try and sleep on their own one time, two times, see how it goes, that I'm not against, and see what happens. And maybe someday, one day it happens, the next day it doesn't, it's fine. But just like, see how far you can push in the, kind of
Safe way.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's probably, you had mentioned earlier that you had your own methods before you did training. And
Yes.
that's my story too, because we trusted our intuition and we weren't afraid of breaking rules, and we were
Yes.
in tune to our children. And that's the type of sleep approach that I have. I actually call it intuitive sleep, because
Yes.
I think it's so important for me as your guide to be using what I've learned intuitively, but for you as a mom to be that expert on your child and be completely
Yes.
in tune to them. And like, you have to untrain your brain. You have to
Yes.
get rid of all those fears and all those rules that are in there. And it can be hard.
We were discussing this with a few other colleagues because so one of us was struggling with a client and explaining how to tune into your intuition. And so I thought about my own journey, because I feel like I've always been very disconnected from my body and all these kind of, things that you can't explain very well. And so I was telling her, just because I wasn't sure how to advise her, but for me, the journey started when I stopped the pill. Because, after 10 years on the pill, I was like, yeah, I need this out of my life. And I started to measure my temperature and watch my cycle go.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start to learn, if you have a good thermometer, you can really watch your menstrual phase just go one after the other. And I remember the first time I saw my ovulation, and then I was like, oh, this is what this is. This is what I'm feeling. And so since then, I can notice my body way better than I used to, because, you've been untrained to have, and on the pill, it's even worse, right? But you have no feeling of what your body's doing. You're taught that you should ignore your cycle, that it's a bad thing. And I feel like that was really, for me, the beginning of being in touch with my intuition and my body, because suddenly you don't ignore these signals and you're like, oh, okay. And that was really, for me, the first stepping stone. So I was telling my colleague, I'm like, I'm not sure if that helps, but these kind of small reconnection of your conscious brain with your unconscious parts of or sensations, for me, is the start of how to get in touch with this intuition that's been lost.
I love that. That's a great explanation, because connection is it. That's everything. So whether it's connecting with your body, with your child, like trusting their cries and their cues and their body language. I love the idea of starting with your own body and your own senses. That's really inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. I love it. It's something that I hadn't thought of, and I actually really like to talk about how to get in touch with intuition. So you've opened my eyes. I love that. So let's talk a little bit more about what I just brought up, though. Let's talk about crying.
Yes.
What's the purpose of crying, and should we be afraid of it?
So when you get pregnant, some of your genes get activated and your body changes, forever. Like when we think just, the breasts are rearranged in a way that you're going to be able to lactate and produce milk and stuff like that. But your brain and a lot of your organs also change. And one of those is activating how to respond to your baby that's going to be born soon. And so kids, they're born so immature, they can do nothing except cry or feed or sleep. Exactly. But the crying, that's the purpose of crying, is to get the attention because they need something. And how can we believe 1 second that these immature beings with a million of connections happening every day have any kind of intention but call because they need something? And then our brains and our genes that are activated are rewired so that we actually answer these cries and soothe them, actively, not like, oh yeah, soothe yourself now.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. It's like, how can we first imagine a method where the purpose is to let the child cry when the crying has a meaning, even if we don't always understand it as a disconnected mom from your intuition and everything. There is a reason.
Yeah. And like the second you started talking about how our bodies change, my mind went to, oh, ouch, when the baby cries and your boobs hurt.
Yes.
You're about to produce or let the milk flow, right? It's
yes.
Exactly what you said. That's amazing. Our bodies are even built to respond to them.
Yes.
Well, and the other thing that I think about is, why do things switch at 4 or 6 months? Why? It's never been proven, right? But for some reason, there's this number, this age,
again,
when
a threshold.
They go from being innocent and beautiful and wonderful, and we want to protect them, and we're connected to, okay, we can turn that off now. Why does that happen?
Yes.
I can't do that. I don't understand it.
It's mind-blowing to be, and I mean, again, as a new mom, as a scientist, the pressure and this knowledge is still strong enough that I doubted, and I was like, oh, if we don't do this now, it's gonna be all messed up. But then, I mean, when you think about it logically, if a baby that's 4 months old needs to learn something right now or never, what does that say about adults? Like, we must be completely over. We can't learn anything new, any new habits. Like, I mean, our brain is like, gangrened, like it doesn't work anymore. Like, how can we think that this little plastic individual can't learn something later? Obviously, it's completely wrong. And yeah, again, mind-blowing for me.
Yes, and that's probably why my clients have such a hard time believing that it's okay to be super supportive during a regression and that their baby is going to be teachable later. They have the hardest time wrapping their mind around, you can always teach a baby to sleep better, or you can not necessarily teach, but shape and do the right things. And it's never too late. And it never occurred to me that it's because they've been programmed that it has to happen at a certain age or you screw up your kid.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And also this idea, and again, I was talking to a mom, she's a wonderful new recent client of mine, and her progress are like exponential. Like I don't know about you, but it's like, I know that this works. I know that my approach works. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be amazed when I see the progress in the families. And I'm like, wow, you did all that. That's so fantastic.
I'm the same way. Excited.
She's very perfectionist. And so I can see now that she's taking her perfectionism on my approach, and she's like, oh, I need to do everything perfect now. And so I had to tell her, and I'm like, and I posted that also recently, like, there's nothing in sleep that ever goes backwards. Like, you don't go backwards, like you only go forwards. Even if, you stopped bed sharing and suddenly, your baby needs to bed share, or your older child needs to bed share, it'll go back. And this is a step in the right direction. Every little step. There's no like, we're going to mess up now because we're doing what we used to do and now it's finished. And it really doesn't work that way. And I would say, even so, I don't know if many families do that actually, because I don't work with such big kids. I'd love to, but my daughter is 7 years old, and usually when she's sick, we'll always sleep with her. Like, first of all, for my peace of mind, but because I know that she'll be more reassured if someone's there with her in case something happens during the night. And I might sleep with her for a few days, and then, things are back to normal, and then we'll talk and we'll discuss, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm going back to my bed so I can sleep better and I can take care better of you. There's no going backwards. Like, that's another thing where I'm like, seriously. And just this word regression drives me crazy. Like,
I never spoke that word for the longest time. I use it now because I know people can relate to it, but I never used to use it ever.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that though? What are you saying?
Yeah, so I was actually looking at papers recently to talk about the regression, because I was like, where does this word come from? And believe me or not, it's not in scientific papers. So I'm not sure which experts started calling it regression. The only moment they talk about regression is in psychology, when you do, a therapy, and then you're back into some of your past histories and stuff like that. But basically, this word is not scientifically appropriate whatsoever. And even when I think about it, it's like, so you think that your baby, again, is going backwards. It really makes no sense. They're just evolving at their own pace, and that's completely normal.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna try harder not to use that word anymore again. I know, I love it. And I intuitively knew that when I started my business about not going backwards, because I used to tell people all the time, you know what, you try this thing, but I don't want you to feel like you have to do it 100%. I feel like just try it. And if the baby doesn't work with you, you're skipping it because you're holding your baby or going for a walk or whatever's going on. You did not lose anything. You can keep going. And now I think I focus on that even more when it comes to, like you were saying, when you're offering support, and maybe baby usually does sleep in their own bed, but then you're in their room or they're in your bed. That's actually just what the baby needs. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about proximity and safety and all of those things.
So one thing I wanted to say before is that there is this other thing going around with gentle parenting. I'll say gentle and holistic, that I also do not like. And it's this idea that any babies can do kind of any activities. So it's really annoying to me when people say, you should take your baby outside and sleep outside, and, they'll get used to it. Well, some babies don't. And I'm also not for the mom sleeping, staying in a dark room for 3 hours to make their baby sleep. But it is true that some kids will never, and I talk from personal experience, sleep in the bright light with a lot of noise around. Yes. And that's so important for me also, because it's a great tip, take your baby outside. If it doesn't work, it also might not work for your kid. And, I think that's also a big pressure for moms, because they're like, what is wrong with my baby? Why doesn't it work for me? Have I not tried enough or hard enough or many times? And I really wish that moms would be like, again, be able to trust their own experience and their own babies, and be like, yeah, so I've tried this 5 times. It really sucks. It worked for no one. I'll give up. Maybe I'll try again in 2 months. Who knows? Suddenly, things might change. But there is also this inherent needs that babies are born with, and we also need to be mindful of that. And it's really important, because this knowledge of our child is going to help down the line. If your own limits and your baby's own limits, then you can really help yourself and create this plan that works for you.
I love that.
And so for the proximity, obviously having 2 bodies, and that works. And there's a lot of data about this on premature babies, helping the co-regulation and helping the autonomic nervous system, so the unconscious nervous system, to calm down by being in contact with another human being, hopefully mom, sometimes dad. It is helpful for regulation of the body and calming down the body, and thus it will help with the sleep. So I was actually doing some research recently, because everyone talks about this, but we don't know why. The important thing is that when we are sleeping, when we're actually sleeping, not when it's happening, but our body is mostly into the parasympathetic mode, which is the rest and digest mode. And this is the mode that's going to be the most prominent during the whole entire sleep. It starts at the rise of sleep, and it will increase, while the sympathetic, fight or flight, will decrease throughout the sleep. So when we think about it, if you're trying to get sleep, then the faster you are towards this parasympathetic mode, the faster you're going to get your child to sleep. And I think that this should be the focus rather than a swaddle, like those kind of sleep hacks that are supposed to make your baby sleep. No, if we go back to the foundation of it all, like how your body and your brain works, the baby needs to be calm and not focused on any anxiety, thoughts. Every time there's a thought, like for example, now we're working, both of our nervous system are mostly sympathetic, like we're problem solving and these kind of things. Like if your mind is like that, I can't tell you like go to sleep right now. Like that's not gonna work.
It won't work for me.
Exactly. And so basically, if we go back to this really ancient need of the body and how it works, proximity obviously is going to be one of the easiest way to get your baby to be safe, secure, and relax and go naturally without thinking. And I'm talking about, toddlers and older kids, to be able to be like, okay, I feel good now. Oh yeah, I can let myself go and fall asleep.
And that's beautiful. Like, I hate the shame around it. Like, I go to events all the time and pretty much half the people tell me that their child's still in their bed and they're laughing because they're like embarrassed. And I'm like, that's wonderful. I'm like, I'm a sleep coach, but you're going to hear this from me first. You've been giving your child exactly what they need. So good for you. And they're like, what? You're probably the first person to ever say that to me, because they don't understand those physiological needs or the differences in kids. And they've been feeling bad all these years that their kid's not like other people's kids. But it's been intuitive, which is the best way to be as a parent.
And this is also what we were talking about, I think maybe before we started recording, but my goal is really for parents to feel good about what they're doing. And you're thinking that these people are, bed sharing and not enjoying every bit of it. Okay, sometimes it's annoying, right? You wake up with it, you get a foot in your face. It's not going to be enjoyable. But if you remove the guilt from it, and if you make it more of a conscious decision, you really can enjoy these years with your baby or your older child in your bed and not make it like an additional load on your head, because moms have enough. Like seriously, we have enough on our mind to have to add, how our kids should be. And I would even add that I'm kind of sometimes jealous because my daughter's highly sensitive and she just doesn't sleep well with us for a variety of reasons. And every time I hope that, we're gonna sometimes, of course, I love sleeping on my own, even without the husband, if possible. just on my own. But sometimes I'd love to have this kind of like snuggles at night and like we couple together. But so because she's highly sensitive, if she wakes up and there's any kind of stimulation during the night, she will be fully awake. Like there's no way to get her back to sleep. Again, that's an example of a specific need, right? But I do love the idea of bed sharing once in a while and making it easy for us, which is not the case.
Oh, I love it. So one of the things that you brought up in your notes to me were is something that I feel really strongly about too, about how sleep training is something that people don't feel right about, but then they give it and they do it and they don't always solve their problem. They may have to repeat it.
Yes.
So I'm really focused on the opposite of that as well. So I love that you already have thoughts on it. Please share.
I would say, and I like to give examples because I feel like that's more, it says more than 1,000 words about amazing sleep data, which is my thing. But I have noticed that my 7-year-old, she's starting to regulate herself. And the other day she told me she was stressed at school during lunch, and that we have those mantras where I make her say, I'm safe. I'm healthy because with COVID, my parents are taking care of me. My parents know what I need. So usually we say that before sleep, but she didn't know what to do because she was stressed. So she started saying those words to herself. And she was telling me, she's like, I said it in French so that no one else understands. and I was like, all the things that you do with your baby or your toddler and you don't know the results because you work for such a result that's going to happen in 2-3 years. But being on somewhat the other side, I see that all these times that I co-regulated, all these times that I was with her, all these times that I helped her understand what's going on with her body and her thoughts, is now showing as, this self-soothing that everyone's talking about, because she is conscious. She knows how to put her nervous system back down to a good level. And so when I compare sleep training and, the method that you and I kind of do, I can see this. I can see that when you put the foundations, you're going to seek the results, and you're going to see this later when your kid is bigger, and you're going to see that they feel confident about themselves. They feel confident that they can manage on their own, and you don't have to force it into their heads. Whereas with sleep training, because you're forcing it, probably at a time that the kid is not ready or mature enough for this, there's no growth there. There's no, the brain, what is the brain learning there? Trying to survive. For me, that's it. I'm trying to survive on this horrendous, anxious moment. And that's why sleep training, in a lot of cases, people are like, oh yeah, we had to do it again and again, every time that there's a little bump or a transition, because it's not this long-term foundation where, in this transition, you are gonna go maybe back to bed sharing, but then you know exactly what to do to put back the boundaries that you need, age appropriate to your child and your needs, and then be like, okay, let's go back to something that works for everyone. And because you brought this co-regulation in the whole thing to make your child feel better about themselves.
Oh, I love it. You are so good at explaining things. Thank you so much. I'm going to be watching this over and over. No, I love that. I love the thought about, how patience pays off. And that's one of the biggest challenges, because parents need those rewards. They need the progress to keep going, or they feel like they need instantaneous results. And it's extremely hard for us to get through to people. Sometimes it's extremely hard for them to change the way that they're thinking about all the sleep stuff. But this, actually, you reminded me that that's one of the things that I want to see studies done on, those long-term results of support.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's coming, and you'll probably be one of the people to do it. I think about this myself, but I want to see all of this studied. It's going to be so beautiful.
Yes, that would be
having
lovely.
more proof. That's wonderful. So let's talk about that, though. Let's talk about research before we wrap it up here.
So we briefly touched on this, but one of my problems with research, and I want to make that clear, that in a sense, I'm very protective of research because I'm a researcher myself, and I've worked with animal studies and human studies. And human studies is like, you can't imagine how hard it is. First of all, because you have to accept how your sample is really not homogeneous at all. And you have to make a lot of concessions. Whereas, with rats or mouse, like you have a genetic pool of the mouse that are basically clone of each other. Wow. And so that it's going to be, more or less consistent in the results. But with humans, that's one thing that's really hard. And you have to consider their well-being. You have to consider their time. You have to consider so many things. And you can't repeat, it's like you get the person in, or the baby or the family, and then if it doesn't work, then that's it. So I'm very respectful of especially human research in general, because it's really hard and we're totally underpaid. But when I criticize when I see criticism on research, it's really hard for me when they're like, oh yeah, they had only 20 people. Yeah, you have no idea what that means. It's a bit like this Instagram counting the followers, right? You forget what one person means.
Yes.
Having 20 people in your research. And so just a side note, I worked with people with tetraplegia, so people who are paralyzed from the neck down. And when I got 20 people in my study, I was like, oh yes, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
And working with these people, I can barely imagine what it means that like to work with newborns and families and exhausted new parents. Like, I don't even know who are these parents who take part in those studies. And like, I'm thankful for them. So that's the first thing I wanted to say in a very, very long story.
No, it was great.
But what the problem I have with a lot of sleep research is the interpretation. So, and actually not only sleep research, but a lot of research where you're like, oh, so we got this, so it means this. My vision of science, which I think more people should believe, is that we never reach the truth. With the science, we only get closer and closer and closer, and it changes every day. There's no one truth. So I would never say, you know, we saw this, so it means that babies need this. No. I can't agree with that. And so one of the big problems is that they tend to use only one factor to measure well-being. And I'm like, okay, what does well-being mean? Like, in such a complex, even in animals in general, you know, well-being, it means a load of different things. Like sometimes, like yesterday, I was not feeling good and I kind of forced myself to smile, and suddenly I felt the smile and I felt the happiness. How do you explain this? Like, I was stressed a minute ago and suddenly I'm not stressed. I'm probably still stressed, but somehow I managed to infuse some well-being into me. So when you tell me that, you know, cortisol is the measurement of well-being, and so if the baby's level of cortisol is good, then that means that's good. I can't believe that. Like, well-being is way more complex, and I don't believe that well-being can be measured with one variable. And so that's one of my big issues with sleep training studies, where they're like, oh yeah, look, they're not stressed. And I'm like, even stress, you can't measure stress with just one variable. So again, the interpretation for me, it's going too far into what it actually means.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Now, doesn't mean you're going to stop researching. You're not going to stop, you know, hoping for more evidence and answers, because it's exciting, right?
For sure.
That reminds me. Have you been following the study that was just released? What are your thoughts on that about SIDS?
Yes.
Just briefly, because I know
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but it's been thought for a while that the autonomic nervous system is related to SIDS. And I would say, because I worked on sleep apnea, I had thought about it, because in sleep apnea, you have obstructive, which is when you can't breathe, but you'll have central, when you just stop to breathe. And I always thought, is there a link with this? Because, you know, why would you suddenly stop breathing and stuff like that? So I'm really interested to see more and more research on this and the autonomic nervous system. The only thing that we have to keep in mind is, like, any measures for SIDS is not, it's just decreasing the risk. Like, SIDS is the perfect storm. You have multiple factors and you can only do your best, and I want parents to know that. But it is true that if there is this inner kind of condition in the baby, then of course the risk is higher. Now, will we really start screening all these things on newborns? That's my problem. I don't think so. Like, even with people who have financial security, I think we're far off from that. So we need to continue with, as many preventative measures as we can, and knowledge, because, how breastfeeding is protective against SIDS. It doesn't mean that moms should feel like, they need to breastfeed when this is just messing up their relationship with their child, but they need to be informed and know about it, and then, kind of counteract with other things and other safety measures.
Yeah, thank you. So good. I know I asked you at the end when we've already done lots of talking, so that was perfect. Thank you for sharing just a few thoughts on that. So thank you so much. Oh, this is wonderful. I could talk to you all day. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience. This was truly inspiring.
Thank you so much for having me, Meredith. I had the best time, and let's do that again.
Okay, wonderful idea. Well, before we go, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Right. So Instagram is the easiest way to know about my work. My handle is Science for All Women. And yeah, so I have a lot of free content, a lot of tips there. And you can find a link to my website, SciWom, so Science and Women, SciWom.org, if you want to, get in touch. And I'd love to hear from every one of your audience.
Thank you. And yes, we are both working with people with sleep, and I am not going to say you can't work with Laura. Of course, if you love her, work with Laura. We're both doing something important, and
I totally agree.
Everybody has a different fit that they're gonna really click with, right?
That's so important for me. Like the more people, the more I know that families will find their right fit, because when you connect with your sleep specialist, then that's when the magic happens.
I love it. That's so true. Okay, so look for Laura, Dr. Laura. I'm not going to try to say your last name. At Science for All Women on Instagram, and then her website is www.sciwom.org. So SciWom or wom.org. I love it. And thank you to my listeners for being here and spending time with us today. Please share this episode so we can support exhausted parents and their babies the best way. And take care and come back soon. Thank you for listening to the Sweet Slumber Podcast, the good, the bad, and the sleep deprived. If you enjoyed the show today, please take a moment to write a review, leave a rating, and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. This will also help more mothers find my show. Thanks for listening.